looking around at nature and the seasons and realizing like, it's not a sprint for nature, it's a cycle. And this is how we need to live our lives as well. And so that's what I have taken into my personal life and now into my work.
Hello, and welcome to the Connect podcast. This show is all about helping you connect to your soul's calling so you can take action on it. Because the sweetest success is a blend of discovering your purpose with the inner drive to bring it to life. I'm Sheila Botello, health coach, lifestyle entrepreneur, and mom of two, best known for my online wellness programs, mentoring, and self-love passion. Listen in for inspiring interviews, solo chats, and Q&A sessions that will move you past overwhelm towards what lights you up. Stop accepting good enough and go for your version of great in your health, business, and relationships. Let's get started. Hey there, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is a fitness coach, essential oils specialist, host of the Wild Wellness podcast, and creator of the Workout Without Burnout Blueprint. Jenni Hulburt has a Bachelor of Science and Master's degree in exercise science and sports psychology, and is also a wellness advocate with doTERRA, teaching people about essential oils for non-toxic living, natural health, and creating their own home apothecary with the power of plants. Everything she offers is to help women live and sweat in sync with nature. She believes you can reach your goals without sacrificing your well-being as you seek to embody what nature has always modeled. It's not a sprint, but a cycle. We talked about Jenni's life growing up on a farm in Ohio, what led to her current work, and how asking good questions can start you on a path to elevate your well-being. This was such a grounding conversation for me. Take a deep, nourishing breath and enjoy the interview. Jenni, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm excited to have our conversation.
So good to have you here. I noticed that you grew up on a farm in Ohio. And now you live in, you say, the woods of Pennsylvania. I'd love to hear what city or what town. And I'd love to also know, what were some of your favorite memories growing up living on the farm?
Yes, I'm in Western Pennsylvania, among all the trees. I love it. I am about an hour north of Pittsburgh, for reference to a city. And growing up on a farm, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful to my parents for raising us in this environment. And I just, the more time goes on, the more I appreciate it, I think, for all the lessons. But my greatest memories are definitely raising animals. I was in 4-H and raised all kinds of animals, starting with rabbits and going to pigs, and cows were mostly our thing because my dad still raises and did raise beef cattle. And so cows were kind of our main animal that we would work with. And I just loved being able to connect with the animals. And it was such an interesting way to see the life cycle of things and just experience so much about the natural world around us. So definitely raising animals. And we also had a garden growing up, and it wasn't a fond memory at the time, close to it, but it's just so funny now to think back to see my mom, teaching us how to process the green beans, and we'd be sitting there snapping beans and then showing us through just her model of how to can foods and preserve, harvest. And at the time I said I didn't appreciate it because it was just hard work and I wanted to go do other things, I'm sure. But it was just such a blessing to have all of that knowledge and to be close to nature in that way. And I know it was an anchor for me as I then went through many different things in my teen years with an eating disorder, in my 20s, and then later on with adrenal issues, and always coming back to nature, always coming back to the fact that real food is where it's at. There's real food and there's processed polluted food, and I'm all about real food. So that took the confusion out of food for me, and diet dogma and all those things. It just helped me to come back to like, oh yeah, just eat from the earth, eat nature's food. And so that helped me with my eating disorder and recovery from that. But then also when I got into dealing with adrenal issues and hormonal challenges, I realized that I was on this pattern of just go, go, go all the time. And I looked around at nature and realized at some point, it wasn't just like this one moment, but over the course of time, as I was trying to recover and heal from this and see what I needed to do different. It was looking around at nature and the seasons and realizing like, it's not a sprint for nature, it's a cycle. And this is how we need to live our lives as well. And so that's what I have taken into my personal life and now into my work, because as a fitness specialist, I really focus on helping women to what I call live and sweat in sync with nature and our cyclical bodies, because it's so much healthier. It's the way to wild wellness, as I call it too, because wild is an acronym for women into living their dreams, and not just the nature inspired element of that, but it's about us being able to take care of ourselves so that we can do what we're here to do and live the life that we're here to live and experience everything that we're here to experience.
Women living into their dreams. That is really what this podcast is about, for people to connect truly with their purpose and to live into it and not to put it off, and to also understand and seek those things that light them up, that they and know that they're worthy to explore that. And I think it's so interesting. There's many parallels for you and I, because I grew up in the country as well, outside of Ottawa, Canada. And I was not on a farm, but I was on an acre of land on a dirt road. And there were cows in my backyard, basically. There were 3 or 4 farms behind me, all in a row, and then a few in front of me. And so, honestly, I would go up and talk to the cows across the fence. And, it was so beautiful being connected in that way. And we would have people coming down the road with horses. And my friend down the street had ponies that we got to ride. And I had a dog who would love to roam free. Like we had a beautiful run for him. But one day I came home from school and he wasn't there. We're like, Max, where are you? And it was like the country. So you're like, just Max, calling him. And then I hear him howling down the street. And about 4 doors down, there he was. The whole chain he had ripped from the run, and he wrapped himself around a tree. And so we found him. But those memories of being in the country, those memories of having time and lying on the grass and looking at the clouds and having a garden. And yes, not always being into raking and hoeing and doing all of that, but knowing and gaining those skills. Like I had farmers in my family. My great aunt lived to be, I think, 103 and was a farmer's wife. And she made the best cherry pie there was. And so I have definitely a deep connection to that kind of life, even though it wasn't I didn't grow up having those chores like you did. And I see how there are gifts now you can take forward into your life. Although at the time, I'm curious, I know I wanted to get out of the country and go to the big city. How did you feel? Did you want to leave, or were you happy to stay when you were a kid? Or a teen, let's say.
I never had the thought that I wanted to really go to the city. And I never had the thought like I want to get out of the country. It wasn't really either one. I've always gravitated towards going to see new places, I think, and just that adventurous newness. So like, for example, in college, I wanted to study abroad, and I did that in Spain for 4 months. And then as my degree wrapped up and I was looking towards graduate school, that led my husband and I to Canada as well, actually, to Newfoundland. That's where we did graduate school and lived there for a few years. And then just because of jobs and things that took us to the Southwest, we were in Arizona. But there was a pull for me to come back to where my family was and to be closer to home. So even though I love many places that we've lived, and I really do love the Western US and would like to spend more time there, at least part-time, I love this area that I grew up in, essentially. The area that I live now is about an hour from where I was raised, but it happens to be where I live now, where my mom was raised and where my grandparents have lived for many years. So It just I feel quite a connection here. And I grew up on a farm that was like, a long driveway. You could barely see the house from the road, and just wide open expanse of fields with a little patch of woods on the property. And I love that. There's so many things about that. But now that I live like in the forest with so many trees around and really deep in the canopy of just So many trees. I love that so much. And I just think to myself so often, like, oh, I love living here in the trees. Like I'm so connected to being in the woods, in the forest, and in that element. But yet when I go back and visit on the farm, that's so wonderful in its own way too. And I was thinking, as you were talking about your dog getting out and going to find across the neighbors, we had that same thing, but not with the dog, but with the cows. And that was actually another funny memory, because we would get calls at school, my sister and I, letting us know that the cows were out. And, my parents were at work and they worked quite a distance from our home. So we were like the closest ones to be available. So a lot of times we would get called out of school to go and retrieve the cows wherever they were on the county road or somewhere out, we needed to get them back in, which was also very fun for us at the time, because it's like, great, I'll leave school to go get the cows back in. And at the same time, we had so many times when we were, running through the pastures and running to chase cows back in and corral them in. And I remember I hated running really for a long time. Like I played sports and was into it if I was playing basketball or if I was in volleyball and doing sports like that and softball, but I didn't like to just run. And my older sister, really got me into it. And it's funny because I wonder if I didn't like it just because we did so much of that chasing cows, and it probably was a different reason, but she got me into it after a while, and it just became something that I enjoyed so much and have come to love. And that's what I carried with me then when I left, and didn't participate like in group sports anymore in school. Like I identify as a runner. It's still kind of my primary go-to thing. And it's just funny how that all relates back to, your upbringing and the influences that Wide Open Spaces had, and where you were able to maybe nurture those passions that you had or not.
Oh, so true. And, I have these times where when I'm on a nature walk, on a trail, and I'm in a town of, like 150,000 people and connected to other towns of similar size outside of Toronto. And so there is nature on the outskirts, and I'm able to take walks on beautiful trails. And I say to myself, younger Sheila, you really had it good. And I know that I appreciated it a lot of the time. It was probably in those, spreading your wings years that I was like, I want to get out and want to see the world, which makes sense, right? That's the time that you feel you want to do that. And I think I could really handle having a balance of both, even more so, because there's just something that's so special that happens when you're deep in nature. And especially, like you say, the forest. I remember being in British Columbia in one of the redwood forests near UBC and just breathing the air and those incredibly majestic trees surrounding me and just feeling like incredibly at peace. It's the same feeling I have if I'm standing on a beach in Maui, right? It's the ocean, the majesty of that, or standing near mountains. There's just something about nature. And when we can be near those beautiful, the trees and the birds and the ocean and all of that, like we realize how connected to nature we are. And we are really a part of nature. So I love that you've had that. I love that it informs on the work that you do. And I just love the cow chasing story. That's amazing. I'm thinking to myself, oh no, how would you ever get the cows wrangled in? Oh, but I guess you had skill because you'd been doing it for so long. Yeah. But you got your 10,000 hours of chasing cows in.
Yeah. Can't say that I didn't fall or get trampled once or twice, but nothing that was ever too dangerous. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, if you can do that, you can do anything, right?
Yeah.
So, who are your role models for how you currently live your life and things that are important to you? Would it have been your parents or your, fellow, like maybe your grandparents or?
Oh, yeah. I think of many, actually, many that are close to me that I personally know, and then many that I just learned from through their books or through their programs or things like that. And the ones that are coming to mind at the moment really are those people that raised me in a way. Like I think of, yes, my parents and that connection to the farm, and really having a work ethic that is, find something that matters to you and do it and do well at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in part of that, I also was raised in a very strong mindset of like a type A driven, where it's like push and go. And yes, it's not like there wasn't ever any consideration of rest or of taking a break. But I feel like many of us could relate to maybe being raised in an overall cultural message that suggests that that's sort of the pattern of things. And so I definitely can see that in how my parents worked. And I would say that it has two sides. It was a wonderful example, and it offered me things that are helpful. And it was also a wonderful example, and it was helpful because it's showed me kind of the contrast of what that could look like. So what I really teach and try to embody now is working with the rhythms of my personal cycle. And being a woman, that's something I can anchor to in my menstrual cycle, but it's also something that anyone can anchor to in the seasons of nature, and just understanding that there's a rhythm for things, and it's not that we're always on, and just having that balance between work and rest and hustle and play and all of those things. And they don't have to, be separate or even exist apart from each other. So I would say that I had so many people in my life that were a great example of both sides of that, in the way that I can see the lessons within that particular idea of work ethic. And I think of even just, my grandparents and how they lived, and my grandma being someone who is also, they raise their own food and have gardens and orchards, and were really raised that way. And they grew up in the Depression. So having an appreciation for being able to do things and have things is something that I feel has been passed down. And my grandma, it's funny, even though she wasn't raised in like this kind of modern health culture, you would think, she's so tuned in to like what supplements can she use to support her. She uses essential oils with my guidance. She's all into anything she can do for her well-being. And she's nearly 90 and doing really great. And it's a model to me of like someone who's constantly expanding and learning. So I love that in seeing that about them. And my grandfather, who is no longer here on earth, but he was someone for me who was an entrepreneur in our family. And he started his own painting business. And I think about him as an example because there's no one else in my family that I can look to that had their own business as I do. And that was just such a connection that I feel I had with him that was very special, because he kind of understood a lot of the things that go along with having your own business. And we would have conversations about that and be able to, I would ask him questions and he would ask me the kind of questions that I could tell he had insight on that maybe other people didn't quite have that insight on. It was sort of this secret language of people who understand having your own business and being a self-starter in that way. And he just is so amazing to me how he did that in his life, because he didn't have, he had a little bit of opportunity and he just took it and ran with it. I can't say that he didn't have any opportunity, but it wasn't like he just had something handed to him. It wasn't a business that was passed down by his father. He had, a lot of some difficult upbringings in a lot of ways. And yet he took an opportunity because someone saw that he was skilled at something and he ran with it and did it. So I just love that about thinking about how he did business, and how I've gravitated towards that in my work, and being able to be creative and do things that bring me joy, that then I know other people will feel that kind of ambition, that kind of, I guess what I was talking about earlier with the meaning of wild, when you're a woman into living your dreams and you're doing that, you inspire others to do the same. And it's sort of like that. So I think all of those people that are close to me that I know, and then the main teachers that I'm so grateful for in the cyclical rhythms and the sort of looking back to our feminine nature are definitely the authors of the book Wild Power, Alexander Pope and Shawnee Hugo Wurlitzer. I remember that book when I had my hands on it several years ago, it just completely transformed how I thought about my cycle and about myself as a woman, and all of the misunderstandings I had about certain times of the month when I didn't have energy and I was unmotivated and I wondered what was wrong with me. And I just didn't get it. I thought, okay, well, I need to be on all the time. Like society shows me that this is the good thing to do, to be productive and be getting things done. And that's successful and all of that messaging. And yet it was such a relief to hear that, and so liberating to then put it into practice and feel so much better. And not only how I did my business, but how I approach my workouts and how I do everything. So that's now what I love to teach in terms of my fitness background, is helping women apply that to workouts. But I'm just so grateful for all the people that sort of teach that model. And another one is Kate Northrup and her book, Do Less. And I actually came across her originally through her book, Money, a Love Story, which was really transformative around a financial and money mindset too. And having just such a holistic perspective of that, and also being able to look back and see, where do your money beliefs come from, and where have you come to understand your relationship with wealth, with abundance, things like that. But now her work is so much about cyclical nature of how we function in our work and how we do that in business. So just all of those teachings, coming together in different ways are so helpful for my own journey, which then translates into the things that have my own experiences that come together and kind of alchemize to share.
Absolutely. And these things that we experience impact our own personal life. And then we see how beautifully it helps us to live more vibrant lives. And then we want to share it with others, right? And my soul driven wellness method is centered around also the beautiful framework of cyclical living. And I've tracked my cycle so closely ever since getting married almost 26 years ago. And I used it to conceive both my babies and to have a deeper connection with my body. And so now, really teaching women to move, to rest, and to live their lives according to their cycles is such an important part of my wellness programs. So I'd love to know your focus on cyclical exercising and kind of when you started to implement that with people. How did you go about it?
Yeah, I started my work as a personal trainer, working with people one-on-one and in small groups in a gym setting, although I often took them outdoors for outdoor workouts because I just had to get us in nature. And so many people were out for that. That was what they came to me for often. But it was after that really that I discovered more of this. So if I could have applied that back then, it would have been so wonderful. I transitioned from in-person personal training to more of online health and fitness coaching, and then creating courses now for women to self-study and apply this to whatever it is that they're doing in terms of a workout, whether they're a runner or someone who likes yoga, or they're kind of a mixed bag. They like doing a lot of different things, or maybe they're struggling to get anchored to a rhythm of movement and it's hard for them to exercise for some reason, whether it's chronic pain or just because they feel emotionally stressed, unmotivated, whatever it might be. This to me is an anchor no matter what. It can be for the person who is training too hard and needs to come back and realize that there's rhythms and cycles for them to follow that prevent them from over exercising, or for the person who's maybe feeling like they're underdoing it and they want to do more movement to feel better, but they're having a hard time figuring out what that looks like and how to flow with their own natural rhythms. So what that looks like now, like I said, is self-study courses like Wild Femme Fit and the Workout Without Burnout Blueprint. But the ideas that I share are going back to that concept of the fact that we live in a culture, a society that's very linear and masculine oriented. Many times the messaging is that, you start at one point with a goal and you kind of climb up the mountain, and there's not really an image of a cycle as much as there is this line. And that's a huge shift in our mindset to even have that. We have a progression of things that are cyclical. Just again, looking at the moon cycle and how it goes from new moon to full moon, back to new moon again every month. And we have the seasons of nature, spring, summer, autumn, winter. They all have their distinct differences. And this is also something that we have within ourselves. If we look to, as that book I referenced earlier, Wild Power, they actually talk about us having inner seasons as women. And we go from inner winter and menstruation to inner spring, the follicular phase, inner summer, ovulation, and then inner autumn is the luteal phase. So that concept is something that we can follow with how we move. And what I call those phases are, starting with menstruation, the base phase, the build phase, the peak phase, and then the recovery phase. And that sort of exemplifies what they're all about, just in a nutshell. The base phase is kind of where we're coming back to that starting point, that grounding, where maybe we are having a reset in a way. That's the time of bleeding. That could be the new moon if you're not a menstruating woman. It's that time to set intentions for the new cycle. And the base phase is really a good time to not worry about trying to make gains, but more about coming back to a baseline, coming back to maybe reset goals or just maintain where you are. And it doesn't mean complete rest, although it could. It depends on what you're feeling and what your body needs, but rest, maintain sort of thing before you go into the next phase, which is the build. And that's when our hormones start to rise. Naturally, we feel more outgoing. We feel more energetic. We feel like we can get out there and do more things. And we might even want to do those with other people. So more group workouts instead of doing a solo yoga session at home kind of thing. So the build phase is leading us to the peak phase where our hormones peak. That's the time of ovulation as well. And it's also the time of the full moon if you're lining it with the moon cycle, if you're not a menstruating person. And then once we have that going on, that's our peak time so that we can really take advantage of optimizing our energy during that time, optimizing the fact that we have the energy, I should say, optimize our workouts in a way that if we really want to go for it, then that was probably the time to go for it, and enjoy the energy that you have, because that can often give us a boost of confidence. In my graduate work, I studied the psychology of fitness and exercise and motivation and belief. And it's so important that we do things, that we take action that then builds confidence, because they feed off of each other. Then as we take more action, we get more confidence. And as we get more confident, we take more action. And so it's just important to have those times in the cycle when we actually do that. And then the next part, it's actually really important that you do that in this phase, because the next part is the recovery phase. It's the luteal premenstrual phase where progesterone is higher. And oftentimes you'll have lower energy. Your mood begins to dip. You just don't feel like doing as much. I joke and say it's like the eat more and work out less phase. And it's perfectly fine if that's what you feel like doing, because that's honestly what most of us feel like doing. And it aligns with what's going on hormonally.
It's what you need. It's really listening in what your body needs. Absolutely.
And your body will adjust for it. It's not something a lot of women might freak out about that, having a history with an eating disorder. It was something that I would have freaked out about in the past and been like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? I don't want to be eating all this extra. I just had a lot of thoughts around that, but now I understand.
That's where whole foods come in. And like you say, when you're eating the whole foods, more whole food is good for you. And I will say, because I do want to, I would love if you felt open to talk about your journey through your eating disorder. If you're open to that, I would love to hear, because if there are people listening who they may struggle on either side of that. And I will say, when I was carrying children, my body would tell me when I needed to eat more and when I needed to rest more. And it was very I was so tuned in to my body. And I think that helped me after having kids later on to be able to continue with that process. Whereas I think pre-pregnancy, I was less in touch with my body, because you just, it was just me. I'm just doing what I got to do. And you got to show up and you got to work hard and whatever. It doesn't matter how you feel, push that aside. But then when it was not about me anymore, but it was about, I want this baby growing inside me to have everything it needs. I was listening, I needed to rest. I needed to eat more. My goodness, I needed to eat more. Am I hungry again? And it's, some funny stories around that. But it's so interesting that once I did that and I was eating more, I didn't end up gaining a whole lot of weight because I was eating healthy food. I was craving avocados and things like that, and fresh bolognese sauce and stuff like that. And then once I had my children, the weight just came off because I wasn't eating tons of processed food. I think it would have been different had I been doing that, perhaps. Um, and but I was willing to do that because I wanted these children to have the best start at a very healthy life. So if it was just about me, hey, I'm give me everything, I'll eat it all. But it's like, oh no, this is going to impact my child. I need to just eat really, really well. And I didn't feel like deprived because I was eating the whole nutritious stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but please, I'd love for you to share about your journey if you're open to it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So many things that just made me reflect on that as you were talking, because when you were talking about craving things and having the desire for more, but then being more in tune with that afterwards, even when just because you had basically been in tune with it during those 9 months and then being in tune with it afterwards, it makes me think of how if there was an invitation that having that challenge with food gave me, the invitation was to be more mindful and more mindful of what I was craving and why. And another really pivotal book for me and just teacher was Janine Roth's book, Women, Food, and God, and talking about the reasons why we eat and what we're hungry for and what's nourishing, and just reflecting on, there was kind of two pieces for me. I think it was the piece of kind of eating my feelings in a way, like not, for me, it was needing to notice that maybe I was feeling anxious, maybe I was feeling burned out, maybe I was feeling like there was something bothering me. And rather than identify that, it would just be going to food to kind of do something for that instead. That was the measure that I took instead. And so it was noticing like, oh, okay, I'm noticing that now when I want to reach for something sweet, there's actually something else going on for me. And what else can I do to process that instead of just ignore how I'm feeling? You know, it was like I had looked back and realized how often in my life that I had felt a certain way that didn't feel good, that was negative, that was a difficult emotion to process, and then just covered it up or avoided it and shoved it aside. So that was one key thing to notice for me. And then the other one was noticing just the addiction to sugar, because that was really the issue that I had with food. It was always the sweet things. And it was always a tendency to just consume a lot of them to the point that I just felt guilty and awful and tired and just like that sugar slump, you know? And when I realized what sugar did to your body physiologically, and that it's like this drug that is made to be addicting, or not made to be addicting, but it happens to be, it's processed in a way that that's how it ends up reacting in our body. It's addictive in nature. And it was like, oh, well, that's why I feel that way from eating it. And then I started to learn about all kinds of other natural alternatives, and that I could still enjoy sweets with things like maple syrup and honey and stevia and other things that didn't have that processed pattern with them. And I felt different as I started to swap out the sweets with the sugar, and still enjoyed sweets that are made with natural sweeteners, and enjoyed making them myself and discovering new ways of making desserts. And it was just like, I started to feel different over time. And as I look back now, it's like it's so clear to me that there was a distinct difference between being in that pattern of eating sugar and just breaking it by eating other things, and then being able to not have that pattern of like eat and feel guilty, you know, and just feel good about what I was eating. So it's so important, I think, that no matter what it is that we're choosing to nourish ourselves with, that we feel good about it, you know. And if there is guilt associated with it, then ask yourself why that is, and choose to either continue and process through that, or choose something else. You know, there's so many things available to so many of us. And I know not all of us have the same access to the same kinds of foods and things like that, but to the best that you can, just think about eating as close to the earth as possible. And as you do that, for me, any kind of challenges that I had around food really dissolved when I started to do that.
That's so beautiful. It's amazing how just really getting back to nature, getting back to the basics, it's like it resets your body, and then as a
Yeah.
result resets your mind. And I've encountered, especially in the past year, a lot more people talking about their struggle with anxiety. And I think food is often the place where we will go when we're
Hmm.
feeling anxious, and food to soothe. So, is this something that you share for people also to help ease those anxious feelings, a way to recalibrate their eating? And then also, how do you feel that exercise helps anxiety?
Yeah, I think with exercise, that's interesting because a lot of times we use it as a tool to manage stress, to feel better. And it can be so helpful in that way. But sometimes, sort of just like overeating, if you want to say that, like overeating on something like sugar that doesn't make you feel good after so many times, so many um, consumptions, so many cookies, so many whatever, you know what that is for you. If I say, okay, that was over for me, that was over what I feel good consuming. The same with exercise, like over exercising can get to that point too, where maybe we are actually using it as a tool for stress or anxiety, but we end up doing it to the point that we're actually just burning ourselves out. Because yes, it does release a cascade of wonderful hormones that help us to feel good and help our nervous system to have this adaptability. But if that cortisol release remains too high and it just remains too high for too long, then you have things like I ended up with, which is adrenal issues. And so it depends how you're using it. It's almost like any tool that we have. It can be used for our support or to our detriment, depending on how we're relating to it, even if it's a quote unquote good thing. Exercise is a checkbox. Most people would say, yeah, that's good. Food. Yep. I need to, those kinds of things. It's like, yeah, we eat healthy, exercise, things like that. But just our relationship with it matters so much. So I think really being mindful of, like I was saying with food before, mindful of why do I crave this, and when do I crave it, and what's the emotion behind it. you know um, is there a pattern of something in my past that maybe is related to how I eat it, whether that's the type of food or the pace that you eat or how you feel when you're eating, any of that. And it's the same with exercise. Why am I choosing this? Why am I choosing the kind of activity that I am? Why am I going the duration that I am? Why am I doing the intensity that I am? Is it because I'm training for something and this is my goal? Is there really something else underneath of that? Like, this is because I need this to feel good about myself, to feel like I checked off a box that I'm successful, that I'm productive, that I'm a hard worker, any of those things. And I can relate to all of that. So that's kind of, they're connected. Overeating, over exercising. And, again, those are defined by you personally. I'm not calling anybody out and saying that a certain pattern is overeating, over exercising, but we all know what that is for us, and where we've kind of gone beyond our equilibrium of feeling good.
I totally agree. And I think that there's so much value in teaching people that it's okay to rest. It's not just okay, actually, it's necessary. And
Yeah.
building rest as a self care practice. And I love that you were asking those questions, because that's always what I'm directing people back to also is don't just look at what everyone else is doing. Look within first. How am I really feeling? What would serve me well? What do I really need? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's a nap.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's to start saying no to some stuff. Maybe it's to close your calendar, turn off your phone, and start again tomorrow. Because especially as busy women who are raising families and live, doing their careers and trying to keep everything, all the juggling happening, it can feel like you just got to push through and do more and more. And then when you go to rest, you can't even turn it off at night because you're so, like you say, those cortisol levels are so high, and
Mm-hmm.
you're exercising like crazy and you think you're eating well. And you're like, why is my weight not budging? You need to go to sleep.
And it's something you may have to learn. Like,
Yeah.
I don't feel like it was something that I did well because for whatever reason, whether it wasn't modeled to me in the way that resonated or whether I just decided to ignore the teachings and models that I have, whatever it was, I'm not blaming anybody, but it was like, I looked back and realized like, I don't know how to shut my mind off. Like I need to learn how to just sit here and breathe. And I started practicing meditation and I started like doing yoga. My commitment to a yoga class 2 times a week during that time of burnout and really recovering from that was like, I thought to myself, this is the only hour where my brain is like just in tune with what I'm doing and not off somewhere else thinking and spinning. But that was needed. And it just made me realize how important those practices were. But yeah, we have to be intentional about putting those things into our day, into our life. And I just want to share something really tangible because this came up for me yesterday. I was in between like my work day and then going for a run. And I felt like I had just been doing lots of stuff. I had jumped off an interview conversation and my energy was ramped up. You know, I could tell you might think, okay, well, she's ready to go for a run. But I kind of felt like I just need to breathe for a moment. And I literally just laid on the floor on my back and closed my eyes. And I wasn't planning to like take a nap, but I really just wanted to breathe for however long, just for like 5 minutes. I think I ended up laying there 5 or 10 minutes. And I did that one other time last week in between like my work and my workout. And I did a yoga nidra practice. So sometimes it's like the pause in between what we're doing that can be the rest. And again, you might think, well, you're going for a workout, like, don't you need to warm up and kind of get your energy ramped up? But for some of us, it might be that we actually need to come down and kind of bring things back to just being able to like steady breathe, be intentional, go into it with a really even energy, however that feels to you, like just feeling really balanced and grounded. And I know I've had, workouts, runs before where I've gone into them with all this energy that was kind of cascading from what I had just been doing. And surprisingly, it's sometimes more difficult to do your best, feel your best when you're doing the workout, because it's like the energy just takes over. And even if you feel good during, you might actually feel worse after. So that pause in between is just so key. And it can be between your workday and a workout. It can be between different tasks that you're doing in your workday. That's also something I've been trying to incorporate more myself is getting up after 45 minutes of sitting and doing something to break things up, but also just to have a pause if I'm shifting from like, a podcast interview to answering emails, or if I'm shifting from writing to then getting on a call with someone. So it's having an intentional pause, like taking a few deep breaths. I'll usually grab one of my essential oils, and that's an aromatic anchor, like to just completely reset your nervous system and shift it into a different state. But those little things are just really important, and you don't have to do all of them, but just hopefully something there maybe grabbed you and you can put that into practice if that resonated.
I think that's a great amount of options people have now after listening to that. And maybe some things they, like you say, it's so counterintuitive. No one very often would think that you would want to take that energy and then slow it down. And I agree. I think that would be very valuable for so many people. And here we are. This has been such a great conversation. And I have a question. One of my last questions for you is to I'm really wondering, what questions do you wish people would be asking more of themselves before they start any kind of health practice?
Instead of just diving into the latest trend, the latest thing that they heard on the podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the first thing that's coming to my mind is going back to what I just left off saying, which is that it doesn't have to be everything. And I think just asking, like taking a moment to really get in a space where you can hear yourself, and whether that's taking a walk outside, being in nature, taking a few deep breaths, but just asking, what is it that I really desire to feel right now? Like, is it that I want to feel more energy? Is that I want to feel like I'm restful at night? Is it that I want to feel confident because my skin's cleared up? Like, whatever you might call it, a goal or whatever your health goal is, but just how do you want to feel? And I know that's one question, but then which of these things, like look at it as a menu almost that you get to pick from. Which of these things do I feel like might support that best? And don't narrow it to like thinking that, okay, I have to pick the right one and it has to be the perfect choice. Just go with something, because the whole point and the whole journey that I've had, and I'm sure you would say the same, Sheila, but it's like you try things and then you try the next thing and then you work with the next thing, and just different things in my journey that I reflect on. Like for my hormone health, for example, there's been a long cascade of things that I have worked with, from acupuncture to essential oils to massage therapy to the types of foods that I eat to the way I work out. Like there's it's never just like the one thing that's going to be the thing. So just kind of think about what it is that you desire and how you want to feel, what it is that you're wanting to focus on, and then ask, what do I think is the next thing right now? Like what feels like it feels easy to me to go to, what feels like it's accessible for me to try? Because again, it goes back to, you need to have many wins. You need to have something that you did that you're like, okay, I tried that, I'm feeling really good about, even if it's not the end game, even if it's not, you get to the finish line with it and like, okay, good, I've cleared up that issue, or that's not something that I'm working on anymore. It doesn't have to be that, but you'll get to, it's like peeling back layers, there's another layer and then there's something else you learn. And just through doing these things, you discover new things about yourself, and you discover new things about the process of what it is that you're on. And I think that's the whole point. Like we're here to experience things, and we learn something from everything if we're in tune to that, I think.
Those are great questions, great things to ponder and consider, especially now as we're at this time. I think it's like just the halfway mark between winter and spring 2021. And I'm finding even now that the sky looks different. And I feel like there's a sense of possibility in the air. And especially now, I think we need that. We need those feelings of hope. We need those small wins. And to know that by asking better questions, we can find some better answers and some better next steps. Thank you so much for sharing that. So what are you most excited about that's coming up for you?
Oh, it's not something I can share a ton of detail about, but it's coming, and it's related to helping people connect deeper with nature. But it's a new project that's been in the works, and it's close to home, and it is related to what I said about helping others connect with nature and realize that the experiences that they have in nature are some of the most powerful shifts that they can have for their well-being. So that's what I'll say, and stay tuned.
Ooh, I will be watching. That's exciting. And so please let us know where people can find you and follow you so that they can hear what this beautiful new project is going to be.
I know, I like dangled the carrot, right? The other thing I would say I'm excited about, Sheila, is just like you said, the spring. Like the sun is beaming in the window right now, which is rare in Pennsylvania for it to be sunny in the winter. And I am excited. Like I've come to embrace the seasons way more than I used to. I used to really, really struggle with winter. And I'm not saying I don't have days now where it's a struggle and it's like, oh, I just want to see the sun. But that I'm so grateful for the sun and these longer light days. And it's just feeling like this emergence, it's fun to feel that. And it's like when it comes, it's when your body is ready for it. So it just feels really aligned and great that way. So I'm excited for that and planting my garden and all the seeds that are going in. So thank you for the conversation. Everyone, I'd love to connect. My website, jennihulburt.com, and I'm on Instagram and everywhere on social media at Jenni Hulburt. So those would be the best places to connect further.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you could be here. And everyone, thank you for listening. I would love to know, and Jenni would also love to know, what resonated most for you in this conversation, and what good questions are you going to start asking yourself? Please tag us on Instagram with this episode. We'd love to hear. Thank you so much for being here with me on the Connect podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with someone you think would enjoy it. Also, if you head over to iTunes to leave a review, I'd be so grateful. Let us know what your favorite parts were and what you'd like to hear more of. It will help us have a greater impact, elevating many more people to grow and succeed together. See you next time.